Hi, I'm Dana Nielsen, Senior Designer at Convergent IS. Today, I'm here to give you some easy, practical tips to incorporate design thinking into your day-to-day work, no matter what your role is. Design thinking can be a bit intimidating. You may have seen a version of these 5 steps, but it's hard to tell what they actually are and where to get started. Put simply, design thinking is a human-centered approach to problem solving. How's that relevant to me? I'm not a designer, you may ask. Well, let's break it down. First, problem solving. Every day we are all faced with problems that we have to solve, whether we realize this or not. Whether you are drafting an email, setting up an event, writing some code, or putting together a presentation, you are creating something that addresses a need within some constraints, and you're making many little decisions along the way that affect the end result. We can call this problem solving, or even designing. Now, human-centered. This is relevant because there is a human element in everything we do. No matter what you're working on, it's a pretty safe bet that someone is going to have to interact with it at some point. We can call this an experience. Good experiences lead to loyal, satisfied customers and productive, effective employees, not to mention a better world in general. I'm not saying that you should go through a multi-step design thinking process for every email you write, but I am thinking that you should think of designing and problem solving more broadly, and that a design thinking mindset can improve your everyday problem solving and work products. You don't have to be a designer to do design thinking. You don't have to take a course. You don't even have to consider yourself creative. Anyone can incorporate it into their work, and it doesn't have to be hard or complicated. A little design thinking goes a long way, even if you just spend a few minutes doing it on your own with little thought experiments. You don't have to complete all 5 steps to realize the benefits. In fact, thinking that it's a 5-step, multi-week, all-or-nothing process is a big barrier to getting started. If that's what's holding you back, let me tell you that that's only the case for the largest projects and the thorniest of problems. For everyday problems and small to medium-sized projects, you can jump around a little and pull out the tips and techniques that suit the situation. Think of it like improvising in jazz. The sheet music is the framework, and you tweak it as needed. I'm going to briefly explain each of the 5 stages in the traditional design thinking model and give you ideas for how you can implement it today, right now in your organization, no matter what kind of problem you're facing and no matter what your role is. Stage 1, empathize. Empathize is the research phase. In it, you set aside your assumptions, gather information about your end users, and seek to understand their perspective. No matter what the product, process, or project is, humans will have to interact with it at some point and in some capacity, so understanding them is vital to success. So how do you do it? First, practice empathy. Developing this mindset is the easiest and most important thing you can do, and it can be really effective. Put yourself in the end user's shoes. Consider what their needs, wants, and goals might be, and let that guide your choices. Next, examine your biases. This is hard, but try to be honest and critical with yourself. Think about your background, training, and knowledge, and about how that influences how you think and act. Consider how others might see things differently than you. You can also read through existing customer services or support tickets. These existing artifacts can tell you a lot about common problems or misunderstandings, and they're probably already organized into themes for you. Talk to customer-facing coworkers like sales or customer service if you can't talk to your end users directly. Because they have such frequent contact with end users, they are a wealth of knowledge. And finally, observe or interview users. A combination of observing and interviewing users on their own turf is the gold standard of user research. Observation is a useful addition because people are generally not very good at articulating what they do and why. This one is obviously higher effort, but it doesn't need to be super complicated. If you can't do site visits, you could go to a trade show or a showroom, or set up a screen sharing session. Stage 2, define. In the define stage, you synthesize all the user research you gathered and form insights. These define the problem that you're seeking to solve, or in other words, the opportunity for innovation. So how do you do it? This can be a formal process, but you can also just think through it by yourself. First, connect the dots. Are there common themes that come up again and again? Step 2, articulate the problem. This is important to do before you jump into solutioning. Identify the pain points, recognize the unmet needs. And step 3, go deeper. Get to the root cause, keep asking why. What are you really trying to solve? What are the underlying issues? You may be surprised at where this takes you. Stage 3, ideate. Ideation is the most recognizable stage of design thinking, brainstorming. Now that you have background knowledge and a well-defined problem, think of as many ideas as possible that will solve or at least alleviate the problem. Sticky notes are optional. So how do you do it? Here are some general tips for brainstorming. It's important not to censor yourself. That slows you down and stifles creativity. Ideas can be wild and far-fetched. Go quickly and go for quantity, not quality at first. You can weed out bad ideas and refine your better ideas after. Brainstorming by yourself. Challenge yourself to think of several different ways to solve a problem. Your first idea is probably not your best idea. I know mine aren't. Usually, there is one really obvious solution that comes to mind immediately. But push yourself further. What else could be done? How could I approach this from a different direction? It doesn't have to take too long, but try to come up with at least 2 or 3 alternative solutions. Brainstorming with others. Traditional group brainstorming involves everyone calling out ideas and then discussing them as a group. The problem with this is that it favors more senior or more outgoing people who are more likely to speak up. Plus, it's pretty hard to think of your own creative ideas while listening to others and trying to play off theirs. So try giving everyone time to brainstorm quietly, alone, together. After, you can take turns sharing and vote for the best ideas. Try this one in your next meeting. Stage 4, prototype. In the prototype stage, you create a low-fidelity representation of the solution to show other people. You might prototype several of your ideas simultaneously, or just prove the most promising one to work with first. So how do you do it? The word prototype might bring to mind a sleek, futuristic design on a pedestal in a laboratory. However, a design thinking prototype is simply something concrete that gets the idea out of your head and into the real world, where other people can interact with it and give feedback. If your solution is digital, it could be a series of sketches on paper or slides in a deck, each representing a different screen. You may have heard of paper prototyping. This is it. Simple, yet effective. If your solution is a process or service, it could be a scenario or a script for role-playing. If your solution is a physical product, it could be a mock-up of the marketing material that explains the features and the benefits of the proposed product. A prototype is far quicker and cheaper to make than a fully fledged product, so it doesn't need to be perfect, comprehensive, or even functional. It just needs to communicate the gist of your ideas. Stage 5, test. Now you put the ideas encapsulated in your prototype to the test. Show the prototype to someone else and get them to interact with it. Observe and ask for feedback. Does it solve the problem? Does it make sense? Does it help them achieve their goals? So how do you do it? My first recommendation is called rubber ducking. This is not technically testing because it doesn't involve anyone else, but it's a really quick and easy way to check the validity of your thought process. Rubber ducking is a method used by programmers for debugging. In it, you carefully explain your code line by line to an inanimate object, such as a rubber duck. The act of systematically stepping through the prototype, as if you were explaining it to an end user, will help you spot holes, inconsistencies, and issues. This will do in a pinch, but it's always better to bring in another person. Test it with someone else. This is the next step up, to bring in somebody else and hand over the prototype and have them play around with it. Usually 3 to 5 testers is the sweet spot. Ideally, these would be end users, that's the gold standard, but they could be whoever is handy, like coworkers from another team. Just be aware that if you don't test with end users, you might miss some crucial and specific feedback, especially in highly specialized fields. Either way, testing with others will offer fresh perspectives on the problem and on the solution. Don't be afraid that they won't understand. Humans are pretty imaginative, so with a little bit of background explanation, they can understand and overlook any rough edges to give effective feedback. In my experience, this is rarely a problem. And finally, don't be afraid to ask for end users. This might be surprising, but we've gotten some great feedback from clients, customers, and even an overabundance of volunteers for testing. Everyone was very happy to be consulted, and they almost always say something like, "Let us know if you need any more help." People like to have their opinions heard, so don't let that hold you back. After testing, you should have a clear idea of next steps, which parts of the solution need improvement and which are good to go. Finding issues is expected. Don't be afraid to go back to a previous stage and refine your ideas, or even try a new approach entirely. That is the iterative part of design thinking. So in conclusion, you don't have to have a designer title, a dedicated team, a huge budget, a bunch of meetings, or even a formal process to inject a little design thinking into your work and see improved results. In this video, I've given you lots of easy, low-effort ways to start cultivating the mindset and the practice of design thinking. I have a sticky note on my desk that reminds me, don't let the perfect stand in the way of the good. That's one of our principles at Empathize, and I think it perfectly sums up what I'm saying. Start here, start small, start now.